Hello, I'm Julie Haymaker, and I'm going to introduce you to the Shrinkets molds that I have invented. These are the molds right here, and these are to be used in shrink plastic. You may know it as Shrinky Dink. You may have played with it as a kid. It's a plastic that, when cut out into a shape, it can be designed on using various mediums that I'm going to be showing you, and then it can be heated with a heat gun and sandwiched, once shrunk down, sandwiched into these molds to form a bead. So that's a brief overview. These are a selection of the beads I have made with it, just to give you some ideas. I call them beads, but they really are, in their form, bead caps. So these are the molds, and this is a star mold. This is the cone mold, and it can make a little cap style or just a cone mold. This is what I call the bezel mold. It creates a little flat surface so that your bead doesn't rock. And this is the domed mold. It creates this little domed piece. And this is the fluted spacer bead mold. It creates this little fluted spacer bead. This is the star mold. It creates these little star shapes. And I showed you the cone mold, but I didn't show you the two molds it makes. When you use it with the little cap, with this little cap, it creates that type of a bead. And when you use it with this little cone, it creates this little cone bead. So that's just a brief overview, and I will be demoing these. So those are the molds. And these are just some of the beads. And next, I'm going to show you what you can make with it. And then we will go into actually making it, and I'll give you more details of each thing. Okay, so next I'm going to show you some of the items that I have made with it. This being a whimsical style bracelet. Leaves on it, and beads designed with colored pencils on the surfaces. And then you can go more sophisticated. And I did a flat piece and was able to do bead peyote stitch around here, and then something more sophisticated. Then in this case, I was able to make a domed cabochon in this and build up in layers with beading. Here's one with my handmade cabochons, and then using the beads around it along with seed beads, to create a garden effect. And here's one where this one I used a lot of pastels to color the shrink plastic, tiny beading, and then I did this trailing thing with the leaf beads that I'll show you how to do that. And here we go back to very whimsical. A selection of all types of beads formed. Once again, more whimsical still, but much more sophisticated color palette. This one doesn't have its chain on it, but just a little bit of the beadwork and then working with it flat, but just one of the molds there used. And then one more more complicated piece. This is hand forming, and I sell a hand forming set on my site. This is a Gail Crossman Moore bale making, and then I did my own ideas with it. So really fun and versatile. So this is part of my hand forming. I recommend a bowl, and if we do hand forming, it's nice to have the gloves to touch the hot shrink plastic. Next, after I showed you the molds, you need a heat gun to heat the shrink plastic, and this is a 320 watt craft heat gun. And the various mediums that we can use on this, these are pastels, and I rub them on a fine grit sandpaper. I'm going to lift this up and look at it. This is a 1200 grit sandpaper, but you can use like anything that says a fine grit sandpaper to take your sticks of pastels and rub them on there for color. I'll be showing that in a little bit. You can use inks. I really love Hero Arts, Sukaniko, and Ranger inks. So nice high-end ink pads, inks. These are permanent. They must be permanent, and that is usually says that it's permanent. It'll say it's waterproof on it. You don't want something like a dye ink, because that's water-soluble ink, and you don't want to use that because it just could cause problems in the future. And these are, used already, but they're finger daubers that you use to put the inks on. And I'm going to demo that. And then stencils. I just have one out here, but I like to use stencils. I'm just showing you all the things you can use. You can use colored pencils on them and markers. And even spray paints. Krylon makes these stained glass ones, and they're very nice. You can get a mist on your shrink plastic to give it a color. And then you can even use inexpensive eyeshadows. These are eyeshadows that I get on Amazon, and they're fun. They're not that expensive. I mean, under $10. And then I have this little tool that it's a makeup brush tool, a nice wide one that I apply those with. So a little makeup brush tool. I think I've gone over the materials that you can use, and then I'm going to be demoing them. So that comes next. So let's start the demoing, and the first thing I want to show you again is the pastels. So when it's a pastel, I'm using art pastels. These are Prismacolor New pastels in sticks. This is Sennelier pastel. So they're stick pastels, and some of these you can buy individually. And I buy them at dickblick.com, and at the end of this video I'm going to give you links of places, websites where I purchase materials. So the other type of sandpaper, I'm going to demo how I can get the sandpaper on here. This is a nice 3M and a 220 watt. So basically I'm setting up a palette like so. And then I'll use my fingers to get that onto the shrink plastic. So I'm going to get started with this. And let's say I'm going to demo, for starters, colored pencils and pastels on the shrink plastic. And the shrink plastic comes with a shiny side and a rough side. And this shiny side is for mediums that you can use, that you would write on glass with. And basically that's markers and some real permanent, like stays on inks. And I think Sukaniko makes the stays on brand. I kind of don't use those that much because I don't like the colors they make. They're not really bright, and I like bright colors because your colors are going to reduce your colors when you put them on are going to intensify 50% as the shrink plastic shrinks 50%. And so any colors you use, you want to be pretty light when you put down so that when it shrinks, it doesn't become really dark, because then that bead is like a dark bead that doesn't have any light coming through it, and it just is not as usable as a bright bead. So most for mediums are going to go on this rough side. And think of this as drawing paper. Whatever you'd use on drawing paper, you would use the shrink plastic like that. So that's your pastels, your pencils, your markers will work there, your inks will work there. And yeah, these inks are not made for, typically not made for non-porous surfaces, but with blotting and putting them on lightly, we can make them work. So I'm going to take this, I'm on, I said, the rough side. And I'm going to do an ombre effect. So I've got the green going there, and I'm keeping in the same color family. If I mix colors, blend them across from the color family, like orange with blues, I will get brown. So I don't want to do that. I want to just go like the rainbow would go. Same color. I got the same color from over there. So this is how I make an ombre effect. That's the green. And then I can put a little orange over on the tip. So notice that I'm not going to mix the orange with the green because that'll turn brown. But I can do this. I'll show you. If I do orange and green on top of each other, I get brown. So I recommend going within the color field. And I'm going to brush out so that I make sure. It's always important that you rub it in well. And I have a damp rag over here so I can wipe my fingers off. Now, I can go over this with inks and stencils, or I can go colored pencil, or I can use a combination of all. So on this one here, I'm going to show you how pretty it is to use the colored pencils on this. And now in this case, I'm not going to worry about the blending rule because I'm just overlaying with more of an opaque color, and it isn't about blending and mixing and making brown, if that makes sense. It's just a solid color. Whoops. So this is how you can use, one way you can use the stencils. If you feel you're not good at free-forming patterns, pick patterns on your stencils and use them just to make fun little patterns. Okay, and then I'm going to take my black and I'm going to use one of these circles and come out here. And this is if you're not comfortable free-forming. And you can certainly free-form on that. Okay, now I'm going to get in with a little my ink, and I'm going to take this deep orange and I'm gonna come around here using my dauber and put colors on the tip. Now ink pads can start to dry out when they're getting out of ink, and this is the case with this one. So when it's really brand new, it'll be really wet, and I want you to make sure you test there, because you want to be able to build up your color. So you like it light. So if it's really wet and juicy, get a lot of that juice off so you don't do overkill on your shrink plastic. So now I'm going to come in with marker and do freeform. Okay, so I've used pastels, I've used pencils, I've used markers and inks. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a freeform overall pattern with green. And then let's see. I think I'm going to call this a day and call this one done. And I will be shrinking it for you so you can see what that's like. So this one I'm going to use the bezel mold for. And this is the metal glide pin, and this is the base of the mold. Now I have a choice. That's the shiny side, and that's the matte side. In this case, I placed the shiny side down in this mold when I shrunk it, and I have a shiny surface on this side, and I have the matte surface on this side. And it just depends on how I'm going to utilize this bead. Am I going to be making a dangle out of it, or am I going to be making a flat-facing bezel out of it? So you just have to decide. So in this case, I'm going to put the shiny side down like I did on this one. And so we will see shiny on this domed bead. And I'm heating, and I'm keeping my heat about to the top of the glide pin. That's the metal pin, and around the perimeter of the bead. I always keep the heat outside in. On a big bead, it takes it a little while. Notice that things are starting to shrink. We're waiting for it to shrivel up. Keeping that heat on the outside. This way we have less of a worry about the beads touching. Let them curl up like a leaf and then flatten back out. We wait for it to stop moving on its own accord. It's not shrinking anymore, and it stopped moving. We don't keep heating. We don't want to overheat. Now I'm just putting that top down there and pressing gently, just gently. and I'm counting to 5. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. This is a bigger bead, so I'm going to add a couple of more seconds to that. 1006, 1007. This is to give it time to cool. And this is our bead. And you might ask, don't you need to seal that shrink plastic? Seal your finishes? No, I don't, because they embed into the shrink plastic when they're shrinking. So that is how that bead will look. Next, I'm going to do a bead where I'm going to use this in the dome mold. So I'm going to take my Hero Arts ombre pad, and I'm going to pick the purpley color and test and see. Always test and see how much ink you have. Like I said, you don't want it really wet going on there. And I'm able to make this color, soft color, very much like I did using the pastels, but this is using the inks. Now I'm going to take my yellow ink, and the same thing, if I blend yellow over purple, I'll make brown. But if I just put it out to the edge of it, it's the complement of it, meaning kind of across from the color wheel, and it will really make it zing. So there I am. And now I'm going to line this guy up perfectly because it's got the same amount of points as my bead, and I'm going to get my orange color out here. Make sure it's, well, it isn't totally lined. I guess it isn't, so I'm going to have to move it around, making sure. I'm sorry about that. So if you don't, if you want to use a stencil and it doesn't perfectly match on your bead, move it around like so. When I say match, this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points, and our bead has 5. So there we are. And I'm going to come in here with blue pencil, and you certainly do not have to, you wouldn't have to mix any pencil with this. You don't have to. You can just keep it like that. And I'm going to come out here with pink dots. When I said keep it like that, you could just do stencils and ink. And coming in with this beautiful lavender. And I'm coming in with this green around these guys. Coming in with the black marker. This is a really warm Naples yellow. Now, the colored pencils that are my absolute favorite are the Holbeins. These are so expensive. They are almost out of my budget. And so Prismacolors are my next favorite. And there is quite a bit of difference. And the price range for the Holbein is double. The pigment is just 10 times more intense. Much more wax in the Prismacolor than the Holbein. When I can get Holbein, I will use it. It does make a difference to me. Okay, so we are going to use our little white mold on this. And last time I showed you shiny side down in the mold side, shiny surface. This time I'm going to make a matte bead, and I'm going to first pop out that center hole, and I'm going to put the matte side, the side I drew on, down in the mold. And this will heat a lot faster because it's a smaller bead. And I want you to notice how light that color was when I did it. Now you can use either side of this topper. People call it, I call this the doming pin. Okay, I tend to like the cone tip. There we go. Bring this down. Try to bring in here where you can see it. Here, let me try to bring it up like this. There, did you notice how this will be a really nice bead to work with because the color's so light, and that gives you more options. So that was our second bead. So we've used these two molds, and next we're going to be going to the fluted spacer bead mold. I want to show you the 5 molds. So I tend to like to use scalloped beads for the fluted spacer bead. That's my preference. So I'm going to show you using eyeshadows on this, and I'm going to bring this in. The iridescents are really nice, so let's go for an iridescent in the turquoise. And these have to go on the frosted side. And use my finger to get some of that excess off. You don't want it built up really strongly. You want it to have just, you know, an even finish. You don't want gunky on it. So then I'm going to come in with my Prismacolor pastels and put this on the perimeter. Okay. Now, come in with ink and come in with purple. I'll peek under that, see how that's behaving. There, and you noticed I didn't do the center. I chose not to do that. I'm gonna double check, get clean, come in here with some clean because I think I want to get this off the back side. You gotta be, and that was good that I did some blotting. You want to get some of that excess off. There we go. So now let's come in here with this, and I'm just doing some overall dot patterns in between these lines, these shapes here. And I'm going to come in with orange here. And where it kind of intersected a little bit, it's turning a muted color, like a brownish color, but that's okay with me to have that muted color and just a little bit of a line on this. I don't know if this will show up, but I'm going to put it on because the eyeshadow is translucent and the colored pencil is opaque. Now I'm coming over here and making sure that I get some of that off. And I'm coming in with my fluted spacer bead mold. And on the fluted spacer bead mold, it doesn't matter what side is up or what side is down because this bead is the same on both sides. It doesn't have a top and a bottom. Colors on this bead will be pretty sophisticated, I think. Done moving. We don't want to, it's flattened out, done moving on its own accord. Put this down, count to 5, 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Now, this is the shiny side, and this is the matte side. And can you see the iridescent? And I made sure that was really buffed in, and I still got this wonderful glow. And I see how I put the orange on there and how that pops. That's really fun. So using the complement on it. Next, I'm going to show you how to use the star mold, and then we're going to go on to the cone mold. Our star mold has to be used to be most successful. Okay, there really are no rules. But to be most successful, I like to use a 5-point bead with it because it's a 5-point star. And so I'm going to be using this one. And this is kind of a poinsettia look. I'm on the frosted side. I'm using pastels. And I'm just gonna get in that same color family. Okay. And then on this one, no stencils, nothing. I'm just gonna come in freeform colored pencil. Just gonna be really simple. black Sharpie. Broke my rule. I said I was just going to use colored pencils. I'm going to use a little Sharpie here. And I'm going to come in and edge the edges on this. Now I'm going to go replace this ink pad with one that works. There we go. This one has a lot more ink on it. See? See how I'm gently lifting up those petals? Don't want to break them, but want to get in there. Now I'm going to take a lot of the ink out of that and then just gently burnish around this so that I've softened any of the rough lines on that, and then come in here really strongly on the tips. And I'm going to add, I used the Holbein yellow on it. I'm going to come in with Prismacolor between these, and another light Holbein color. And I'm coming in and doing the star mold. Getting quite a mess on the table. Just get a nice clean palette so you guys can see this. Doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter on this side, which side I put up, which side I put down. I'm going to put the shiny down on this. And we're going around perimeter. I know it's hard to see with my hand here, but it is, you know, it's important to go straight down on this so that we get the heat even on it. And my heat gun is right at the top of the pin. The piece is starting to wiggle and shrivel. Keeping that heat out. And when I say heat out to the perimeter, and that keeps petals from touching. Notice you can just hit a couple. Now look, it's done shrinking, but I'm gonna shift it gently. And if you have sensitive hands, use gloves or a little popsicle stick. I'm coming down with my doming pin, and on the star mold I do press a little firmer, a little more pressure. So 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. There. And that's sweet as can be. Oops. There's our inside, and there's our outside. And I want you to notice something here. See the yellows I used and the pink line, if you can at all. The yellow and the orange line there. The orange and the pink are Prisma, and the yellows are Holbein, and they're just, it's more intense. It just makes a difference. It's more intense. Okay, now we're going on to the cone mold. And this is, I don't sell this in my 4-piece mold set because I consider this more of a specialty bead. not everything you're doing is going to be for making a cone. So I'm coming in with pastels on the frosted side. Coming out here with some orange. And if my orange mixes with my green, I'm going to get, I told you to go brown, but if I'm careful, I can get a nice olivey green. With inks or with pastels or anything, it's nice to, what you saw me blot there. It's nice to get excess off. So let's come in and I'm going to do some freeform work. And I did show you, if you're not comfortable with freeforming, use your stencils. They're wonderful. If you like the colored pencil look, or use them with an ink. So I'm going to, whoops. Whoops. When you freeform, your bead becomes a little more whimsy, has a little more whimsy, well, quite a bit more whimsy than when you're using stencils and stuff. That gives it more of a much more sophistication. And that's personal choice depending on how you're going to use this and what type of design. But it's really nice to know that your Shrinkit beads can go any way that you need them to for designing. And it you know, I just happen to be much more whimsical in my designing, my design choices. So coming out here. And every intersection of designs where a design pattern intersection seems to me like an opportunity to add more patterns, more lines, more dots, more diamond shapes, more horse-eye shapes. So here we go. Get clean paper so that you're able to see this. And I'm going to make this a frosted bead. So I'm coming down here, putting my glide pin on, wiping off. There's some residue on this. I'm going to put the frosted side down. And then I'm going to heat out to the perimeter so that I don't have a chance of these thin petals touching. If I come in here, they have more of a chance of touching because shrink plastic wants to follow the heat. So if the heat is all concentrated here, these petals want to come in here and touch each other. If it's out here, they will still get enough to shrink, but the heat will be out here, and even though they're being forced to suck in, they'll want to stay flat. I mean, they won't want to curl and touch each other. This one needs a little help. Painting. Okay, I'm keeping my heat out here. There. Okay, I'm going to make sure it's all done moving on its own accord. Okay. Make sure my glide, I touched my glide pen to make sure that it was centered. Sometimes it can tilt. Coming down on this, and then I rock this. See how I'm rocking it around? Rocking is important, and I'll show you why. Because you'll notice that on your bead, that it doesn't quite, if you just press it, one side might be not touching as much as the other side, and the rocking motion helps each petal evenly shrink down, and there we get a gorgeous, gorgeous bead. And this works for the larger beads because smaller beads like this simply won't overlap enough to give you enough petal to overlap. So you need to reserve this for your larger beads. This one being a little bit too small. Now I want to show you the shrink plastic using the gold. There's all different colors, but I'm just going to show you one, and I'm going to keep this really simple. And we're going to do a white shrink plastic. We're going to do white stenciling. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm not using anything except colored pencils, and I'm on the frosted side. Whoops. And I'm going to show you making a little bead, because little beads are fun to use. When I first started doing this, all I used was colored pencils. I'm going to use a shading technique. So I'm going to really burnish my my pencil down so that I can do a soft shading technique. There. Kind of twirl and a really light pressure. The other one technique was contour line, and it was just a nice sharp colored pencil. And I can create ombre effects with this, meaning light yellow out here, inside. So I can create these same with shading. It just takes a little more pencil skill. And I can burnish that. And now I'm going to come out here with dots. And I'm going to show you something fun here. And this takes a little skill. I'm burnishing my pencil out, getting a fat tip on it, and then I'm bordering this. This is how you get a line border on something versus using, I showed you how to use an ink pad to get an edging on something. And now I'm showing you, it's a nice thick line. And, I'm making sure that that's nice and even and not like little chicken scratches. This is just to give this the look of a nice clean border. I feel like I needed to clean up that border a little bit. Now I'm coming in with the complement of blue across from the color wheel. Give it some nice zest. And looking for my black colored pencil. So it's a matter of using a burnished colored pencil versus a nice sharp one. When you're doing lines, I like, pattern lines. Sometimes I like to have it really sharp, and sometimes I like it burnished. And when shading, I always like it burnished. It's a little easier. I like to get a little of that tip off. Okay, let's go for the little cone mold. We're going to do this guy, and I'm going to put the frosted side down. It's a little one. It'll heat really fast. Let's come down on this, and 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. Sweet. That is such a sweet little bead. And that was just colored pencil. Next, I'm going to show you the cone top mold, and this is a little more of a advanced, takes a little more skill to do what I call the little top hat. And I go over this enough to make sure that I've smoothed out blended my ink. There. Now I'm going to flip that over and burnish it off. And make this very, 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 very simple. Simplest bead in the world. Make sure that's blotted. I'm going to use this one here. You're more than likely going to want the shiny, the side that you printed on, designed on, to be the surface of your bead, because the material is opaque that it's hard sometimes to see through it. There. And notice it didn't totally flatten out. That's okay, because it's got pigment on it. When something has heavy pigment on it, it won't flatten out, but it'll be finished shrinking, and you need to gently help the mold help flatten it out. So there we go. The really cute little bead. And then one last one. This is hand forming. I'm going to do, That was it. That was the white ink. There. I'm going to make a leaf bead. Bordering it. And coming in with my bowl to heat it in. Doesn't matter what side it's on, I'm just heating it. Now this is where if you had really tender fingers, you would want to have your gloves on. It's done shrinking. Quickly pick it up. Grab both ends, twist and hold. 1001, 1002, 1003, 1004, 1005. And I get this cute little leaf bead. So thank you so much. That was my demo on all the beads and the techniques that you can use.